Hey friends, I had another great day of rehearsal today. We are cranking through this show. It's a long one, it's a big one, it's a bear in some places, but it's really fun. And I'm having an interesting experience, particularly today, although it kind of started yesterday, but because I am swinging for one of the actors, so in other words, I'm doing their track. I'm doing their, I'm playing that character for these rehearsals. I'm having this interesting experience that I haven't had in a while because I haven't worked as an actor in a while, certainly not in theater. And it's funny, right at the beginning of this rehearsal process, I rolled into it obviously as the writer, one of the writers and the arranger, and I knew I was going to be music directing, so I had a whole set of just both perspectives on it, but also I was coming in with intentions about what my role was going to be, and as a writer, of course, I'm always looking for, well, how can this play get better, right? Like, how can the show get better? And which means essentially changing it, being willing to change it. Most of my psychic energy went to what needs to be rewritten about it. And that's still where a lot of my headspace is. But because I've been very actively involved in the handful of scenes that we've done over the last day or two where I've been playing a character, I've also had this interesting perspective of getting attached, not necessarily in a bad way, but reconnecting with what it feels like to play a character as an actor and to really invest in that and to really get, and what I've done is relatively small. It's hasn't been anything momentous, but it's been enough that I've gotten that little taste. And I remember my friend said at the beginning of this, a director said, there's one thing that you want to be conscious of as writers, which is that when you give something to an actor, they get attached to it. And obviously that doesn't mean that you can't do rewrites as you're rehearsing. That's part of the point of doing a world premiere is to workshop it as you're getting it on its feet, right? So it wasn't like he was saying that, but he was saying just be conscious of that. Be conscious that those choices, those writing choices that might be the right things for the play, have an impact on the actors, and you have to sort of keep that in mind, because as you're, both in terms of like what you do early in the process, what you do midway through the process, what you do late in the process, the kinds of changes you make. And it doesn't mean that big changes don't happen late in the process. Sometimes they do. But anyway, it was just something he put online as a thing for me to think about. And I found myself today playing this other actor's track and going, this is so fun. It's going to be a shame when I can't do it anymore. And just kind of like feeling that actor-y vibe of just enjoying the play of it, enjoying being in emotional and psychological relationships with other characters, with the other actors playing characters, and kind of just letting that whole game happen. It's really fun. So that was one of my kind of takeaways from today, or it's one of the things that as I was reflecting on the day, it stood out to me because on another level, that also has implications for how we or I look at the whole world, right? Because I'm sort of overgeneralizing here, but I would say that within myself, I can always just speak about this kind of within myself. Within myself, I know that there are multiple personalities, and it's almost like I've witnessed those personalities or those psychologies emerge and take and sort of be in charge of me for various portions of the process. So if we're talking about like a really when I'm in writer mode, it's an intellectual, it's a mental headspace that I'm in. Same thing with arranging. You know, when I'm arranging, it's very head centered. As I start to play music, it becomes body centered and somewhat emotionally centered, but not really so psychologically centered. In other words, I feel my body activate because I'm literally creating the music through my body and singing it. It's emotional because the movement of the music is inherently emotional. Music is inherently emotional. It is emotion. I think you could almost say it's vibration. So, but then bringing in this character portion of it really brings me to a new psychological space, and I'm like, oh, now things are happening in my mind that are playful. It's not the mental headspace. It's not the sort of abstracted space. That's a better word for the writer's headspace. It's a kind of abstracted space where the perspective is very bird's eye view. It's very pan project. It's meta. It's looking at the whole. It just has a perspective that's more like sitting in the house somewhere, observing and responding to what I'm witnessing. But the actor's headspace is like just right there in the arena, and I was kind of in that headspace for a lot of today, and I noticed there's an interesting kind of release that happens there. There's an interesting letting go of control that is almost like it's like step one for acting. You can't really perform as an actor without letting go, without just making ourselves vulnerable and visible and just being large, letting whatever is coming through us be seen and letting ourselves play. And I found that, especially it's been a really interesting thing to do, because it's kind of an antidote to the tension that creeps in when I spend a lot of time in those other headspaces. It's almost like all of a sudden my feet are on the ground. I'm feeling my body in the space. I'm listening to the other actors and other characters on stage. I'm engaged very directly and viscerally in a way that I'm not always, because if I'm not, I otherwise just simply because of my role or roles assume a different position and a different perspective, and so I'm just clocking that for myself because I wasn't really expecting that, and I'm really appreciating that right now. I'm really appreciating that. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really kind of having fun with the fact that has been sort of rekindled. And I mean, this is in such a small way too. This isn't like there wasn't that much that I was doing today as an actor. It was just the fact that I did that for several hours in a row and was kind of in that world. Just put me in a very nice headspace. It's almost like I felt relaxed the whole time, even though the work was pretty grueling. I mean, it's tech and it's an incredibly complicated show. And we were doing sequences that were extremely complicated, and we had to work really slowly, but we also had to kind of keep going, keep the pace. So anyway, and I just found I will say I emerged from the process exhausted. I got to the end of rehearsal and I was like, I'm gonna go home and go to sleep right now. I'm like ready to crash out. But again, it's almost like I haven't worked out in several weeks, and all of a sudden I did a workout, and now I'm like, oh, this feels so good. I need some sleep. It's that same kind of feeling, and I'm really enjoying it. And there's something about this that it's reminding me of the fact that element of performance is so important. It's so important as a writer, or at least for me, as a writer and as a musician. It's so important to remember what that feels like, and to not to presume that from the abstracted position of the writer that I see everything clearly, that that's the most clear position to see from. There's just so much gold in that other level that's more immediate and more unpredictable. It's more vulnerable. It's more leaping before you look. There's magic there, and so I think in a way, because I consider myself, I suppose, more of a writer and a writer of music, whether it's songwriting or whatever, because I sort of like, that's what I would say I do, or I am. It's really feels really important to just be reminded like this. Oh, right. There's this world of play, of just psychological play and emotional play, physical play, where you don't have that abstracted perspective, and it's possible to give up that larger umbrella surrounding everything and let the moment inform immediately what's happening. Let ourselves be guided by this kind of these impulses that we can't really control, and that when we're trying to control them, or when we're observing them, they don't operate the same way. We don't get the same. They're not as alive when we're approaching them from this abstracted position. So anyway, I'm just clocking this for myself because it's a really interesting experience to have had, and it's very kind of just took me to a really fun place today. I felt like a kid again. I felt like, oh, I'm just here to play, and I think that if I can take that energy into the music, and if I can take that energy into all the other work, maintain that sense of play, maintain that sense of choosing to not have to know, I think that it can inform all the other aspects of what I'm doing as well, and make and infuse them with that same sense of play, that same spirit of play. So that's what I felt coming through today. It's really fun. Really fun. Fun to be an actor again. Anyway. Thanks for watching, people. I appreciate you. Love you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.